Doesn't make any sense, this appeasement program to me, like, hey, don't do bad things, but here's a bunch of money and you're not going to do bad things with that, right? That's like giving a teenager like cars a fake ID and car keys and $100 and saying don't do anything stupid. They're going to do something stupid immediately, right? So how do we get away from that? All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next episode of What Do We Do Next? This one is going to be a little bit different, and this is, I think, probably one of the more important conversations that I might ever have. And so I appreciate you being here today, and I appreciate your curiosity about the topic, and I hope we can find a path forward. I would like to introduce Zahra Amanpour. She is a lifelong human rights advocate and proud supporter of the Iranian resistance movement. Born during the 1979 Iranian Revolution in Tehran, Zahra's life has been defined by the struggle for freedom. Her father, a prominent advocate for the MEK PMOI, was killed in 1988, a summer marked by the mass killings of 30,000 political prisoners after the end of the Iran-Iraq War. Raised by her mother within the Iranian resistance community, Zahra grew up surrounded by the courage, clarity, and conviction of those who refuse to be silenced. So powerful. She draws deep inspiration from the many women who have led the movement for a free, secular, and democratic Iran. As a board member of the Women's Freedom Forum, Zahra works to amplify the voices of women fighting for their rights under the repressive regimes and to shine a global light on the stories of resistance. Zahra continues to advocate for justice through every facet of her life. In the United States, she channels that commitment into economic empowerment, working to build a more equitable economy for underserved communities. Over the past 2 decades, she's helped thousands of individuals reclaim their economic agency and future. Though many may see Zahra as living a typical American life, raising a family, building a business, and staying engaged in her community, her life is a powerful form of resistance. She currently resides in the New York area with her husband and 2 children and finds joy in music, nature, and discovering the corners of the world. Her greatest hope and ambition remains the same: to see the end of Iran's tyrannical regime and the rise of a free and democratic Iran led by its people, grounded in justice, equality, and peace. So without further ado, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Molly. Always great to see you.
You as well. I always feel more empowered and better after talking to you, and I feel inspired to do more. I really do. I'm like,
thank you. Thank you. I feel more heard after talking to you, and I feel like there's people that care about what we're talking about in this country and around the world. So thank you.
Well, thank you. That's amazing. I mentioned in the intro that about your father and how he was, killed in the fighting in the resistance in 1988. Can you tell me how that has shaped your life and, with your mother, your family, everything? How's that gotten you to here?
Yeah, absolutely. My parents joined the resistance together, so that was a shared decision. But I think what my father, for me, really what has stuck with me through my life and has continued to inspire me and drive me for this movement and for the people of Iran and for the world, frankly, is that the cause of the Iranian people is a human issue. It's not, it doesn't just belong to the Iranian people. It is about freedom. It's about justice. It's about holding the horrible regime accountable for what it has done. And not just in Iran, but across the world. My father was as human as they come. And I was a child, so most of what I remember is from the perspective of a child. But the way that people have always described him to me was that he was just so easy to talk to and someone that could talk about anything with anyone. He was someone that I remember distinctly when we lived in Dorchester, Boston. He would, spark up a conversation with the guy on the bench at the park, and it would be 2 hours later by the time we were going home. And anything he had in his pockets, if there was someone who needed it, he handed it away. And that was just who he was. Being Iranian, he obviously was connected to this cause because of what happened in Iran and us being in Iran when that time came. He was someone that went to school in Berkeley, met my mom in Berkeley, California. They went back to Iran in the late 1960s, actually, and settled there and had my sister and I there. And he, his connection was really through the channel of what he saw firsthand happen to the people of Iran. They were already living under the Shah's dictatorship, But then when sort of the hope came out that there could be some change, that something good could come, he witnessed that being robbed from the people of Iran, and then the regime came to power. So I think what has really stuck with me is this idea that this is not about being Iranian. This is not about any one sort of characteristics. It's really about what it has done to human beings, and especially with women in Iran, and the implications it has for women across the world. And for me, that's personal, whether I live here in the United States or not. And I want to see this regime fall, and I want to see the people who killed my father come to justice, and I want to see the people of Iran free once and for all.
Which I feel, those are all very fair and decent things that anybody would want for themselves or for their family. Let's talk a little bit about, the recent we have these recent bombings, execution of over 1,000 political, prisoners very recently. We've talked, offline about the third option, right? Because, which I don't hear very often in mainstream media. A lot of people are talking about, Iran's getting closer to having a nuclear program, and the Ayatollah, the regime is really bad and that we want to get rid of it. But then where do those things align? And then this third option, which doesn't seem to be as mainstream, and I don't think a lot of people know about that. And so let's talk about, the options are, Israel or the United States bomb Iran, or an overtaking from within, or the third option, which is let Iran free itself, let Iran get its identity back. So let's talk a little bit about that third option.
Sure, absolutely. So this sort of dichotomy that we've been existing within for the past 20 plus years is very intentional on the part of the regime. The regime thrives in chaos and violence. Any fundamentalist entity does so, right? And some of us can relate to that here now. So the regime needs chaos, it needs violence, it needs to create an us versus them kind of situation in everything that it does, in order for it to continue to exist and to continue to do what it does, both in Iran in terms of suppressing the people and externally in terms of the chaos that it has created in the entire region through all of its proxies. So it is very intentionally created this environment where we think there's two options on the table. The first is that appeasement, what we call appeasement in our movement, which is that in order to get the regime to behave, and what I mean by behave is to stop pursuing a nuclear weapon, to stop creating chaos in the Middle East, to stop literally bombing people externally from the country, to sort of do what the West wants it to do. We need to go to a negotiating table with them and start to give in to some of their demands for that to happen. And those demands have been things around sanctions. They've been things around literally money and business deals. They've been sort of opening up the regime's ability to earn money and to use that money the way that it chooses. And so that's one option that's been on the table. That option is also pursued by the lobbyists, Iranian lobbyists in the United States. So they have shaped that conversation in America. They have really made that like the only alternative option to war is that we start to give the Iranian regime what it wants. It also conflates the Iranian regime with the Iranian people as if they are one thing and as if they want the same things. And that could not be further from the truth. The Iranian people and the Iranian regime are two different bodies, and they want two very different things for Iran now and for Iran in the future. The flip side, the other option that we have pursued in the West, in the United States and in Europe, is threats of war, right? That is what we are in the midst of right now, is that you didn't listen to us, you went after a nuclear program, so we have to stop you. We have an external force has to come in and stop this and make sure it doesn't happen. We do agree that Iran's regime should not have a nuclear weapon. We agree with that 100%. But the idea that we have to either work with them and give them everything they want, or bomb them, is sort of what we've been operating within for the last 20 years. So those are usually the two options that the West is considering. And depending on the administration and the current sort of affairs around the world, those are the two options always on the table. What we say as the resistance is that the Iranian people have their own will, very separate from the Iranian regime. They already have the desire and ability to overthrow the Iranian regime. And as long as the Iranian regime is not emboldened through either appeasement or war, right? Because like in war, you say, well, how are you emboldening them? Now they're everybody's sweetheart. Poor Iran. They got bombed. They got, right? So that actually emboldens them. It hurts the Iranian people, obviously, and that's the last thing we want, is anything for like that to happen. But it actually, in the region, emboldens them. So what we're saying is either both of those options will not lead to change in Iran and any of the policies that the Iranian regime pursues. The third option is you support the Iranian people. Within Iran, there are resistance groups that exist, that are organized. We saw in 2022 how quickly the people rose, the kinds of statements that were being made on the streets with like, down with this regime, down with any kind of king. We want freedom. We want democracy, right? Those were the chants that you were hearing on the streets in Iran. So the Iranian people have the ability to do this as long as there's no interference, as long as their voice, also what happened in 2022 that was sitting here in America, I was just like in tears the first time when it happened, is like, we were watching them. We were keeping an eye on them. So when you say, how can we support the Iranian people? Watch what's happening. Right now, like, as you said, 1,000 people have been executed in recent months, right? These are like horrible ways, things that you see in like movies, the ways these things happen in Iran, public executions, showing the people to, suppressing the people through fear, right? If the West would keep an eye on this and actually show what is happening within Iran, that would not only embolden the Iranian people, but it would empower the whole world to support this movement and to support the Iranian people towards freedom. So that's what we mean by third option. We have everything we need. We have a resistance groups. We have resistance units within the country. We have a resistance that's been around for 60 years fighting dictatorships in Iran. It's just a question of allowing it to happen, supporting it, watching it, and sort of empowering it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the most impressive things I learned, is just like how organized and well-trained and ready the resistance is to like actually really replace those systems. Like, it's not just protesting and in the streets for visibility, but like there's education, there's systems, there's things in place so that if you can topple the regime, that there's a plan, that protects the democracy and the people of Iran. And I'm not sure that a lot of people really understand that. I mean, especially right now, we are really looking at this extremism in the United States, and this fundamentalism, except we're not up against nearly the same struggle. We're worried about having uncomfortable conversations. We're not worried about being killed for this. And so it really, to me, it makes me very nervous. It makes me really open my eyes. Like, how close are we to that? And how that parallels here and how we behave here. And so it just made me really appreciate how difficult this resistance is and how many people have sacrificed and how many people have died for it and how dangerous it is, yet you're still there, you're still fighting, you're still working for the democracy of Iran. And so when we're looking at, which is just so commendable, and when we're looking at this third option, how does that really play out, right? Because I'm kind of imagining, like, I wouldn't want somebody bombing us to liberate us from Trump. That doesn't feel like the right answer, so how can, aside from just watching, how can the West, or how can any of us, even just individuals, for me, I know being able to have better conversations with the people in my life about this will be very helpful, but how can we support this movement? How could this actually happen? Is it through sanctions? Is it through, because it doesn't make any sense, this appeasement program to me, like, hey, don't do bad things, but here's a bunch of money and you're not going to do bad things with that, right? That's like giving a teenager like cars, a fake ID and car keys and $100 and saying, don't do anything stupid. They're going to do something stupid immediately, right? So how do we get away from that? Because that narrative is pushed really hard that that's what Iranian people want. So how do we help with that aside from just watching?
I think you have to, again, separate the will of the Iranian people and listen to the actual Iranian people versus the lobbyists that are organized in the West from the Iranian regime and shape the narrative around what is happening in Iran and what the will of the Iranian people are. And that lobbying and that narrative is neither on the progressive side, nor on the, it's neither right nor left in the United States. And that's something that I think a lot of Americans don't realize. They think, well, if it's on this show, then it must be progressive. Or if it's on this, coming through that channel, then they must have good intentions. If it's being paired with peace, supposedly, right, then it must be good. But you have to we have to dig a little deeper and look at who are these people that are speaking on behalf of Iran in the United States? What are their intentions? Some of the most progressive channels that I actually admire and listen to have these people as guests on their show because they haven't sort of separated those two perspectives. So I think we have to get a little bit more sophisticated with how we look at the voice of Iran and what it is, right? And understand that the Iranian regime is bad. There is no turning them into good. There's no reforming them. These are people that do horrible things to people every single day. And they have been doing that for 45 years. They are not the kind of people that you're going to reform in any shape or form. No amount of money, no amount of incentive is going to do that. So I think we have to let go of our desire to sort of believe that the Iranian regime has that potential and instead give that hope and that faith to the Iranian people. We now have tools like social media and other ways to directly tap into the Iranian people, right? And get away from the sort of controlled narrative that we see in the media and in the press that the Iranian regime very much controls, right? So we should be tapping more into what are the actual Iranian people saying, what is their will, what do they want, right? And supporting that and giving more and more voice to that. And it's sort of like what you're doing today, right? This is one perfect example of bring someone in who has a different perspective from the will of the Iranian people and talk to them and just hear their perspective. Other ways, and sort of from a policy perspective, is through targeted sanctions. Now, when you bring up sanctions, people go, oh my God, you want to starve the Iranian people. And that's, again, an image that the Iranian regime has very intentionally put out there. It's propaganda that when sanctions go up, that means they're starving the Iranian people. And unfortunately, they say that to Iranian people also a lot of times, right? Look what the West is doing. This is how they demonize the West. Look what the West is doing. They're trying to starve us. There are very clear channels that fund the Iranian regime, the Revolutionary Guard, and all of the entities, the proxies of the Iranian regime that come through business transactions and other resource transactions that can be targeted through sanctions that would not harm the Iranian people, that we're not talking about taking food from the Iranian people's plates. We're talking about starving the regime's bank accounts. That's what we're talking about doing. And this is not, we have done this. We know how to do this. So we should be doing that with this regime. Targeted sanctions, support the Iranian people, give the Iranian people visibility and voice. That combination will embolden the Iranian people. Right now, the Iranian people are terrified. Obviously, 1,000 people have been executed in the last several months, right? So of course they're scared, but if they feel there's a real chance, like they did in 2022, they feel that they could actually topple this regime, which, there's always that hope in the Iranian people's hearts, right? Then they will do it. And if they know people are watching and supporting them around the world, and it's not going to be just hidden and not seen what the regime does, then they will do it. And that's that combination is what will lead to the toppling of the regime.
Well, and it seems like the resistance is growing, right? Like no matter how much they try to fight it and how many people they kill, it seems like every time they, make the resistance smaller, it grows again, right? Because these generations, just like you were impacted by your father's death, and then the generations after, and social media and everything, it certainly seems like it's growing, and it kind of seems like the regime is weaker than it's been in the past, at least from the outside looking in. the one thing that I really noticed is that so many women are really at the center of this, which is just so contradictory, right? Like, as a Westerner, as an uneducated Westerner, we saw like, oh, Iran was, oppressed, and then the West came in and liberated, and then women were wearing miniskirts, and then the regime came in and ruined that, and it's just like such a distortive narrative. I mean, it's like a snapshot of it, but it's not the whole truth. And we think about Iranian women not having a voice, and under the regime they don't. But the truth is, this resistance is women, right? It's led by women. It's filled with women. Your own mother was is a huge part, or and very looked up to in communities. And so I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the role of women in this resistance, and more importantly, in the future of Iran.
Yeah, absolutely. Women have been at the forefront of this resistance since the very beginning. And, Iran, we as in the West sometimes just sort of bunch all the Middle East together as like one type of thing, right? Iran is actually a relatively educated and resourceful country, right? There have women for generations now have been attending college more often than you see anywhere else in the Middle East. The percentages are actually higher in terms of graduates in STEM fields in Iran than they are in the West from women, right? We have Nobel Peace Prizes. If you look at the number of people and women out of Iran, despite all of the circumstances that are going on, that are getting Nobel Peace Prizes, right? It's incredible. So women have always had this role in Iranian society, which is why when the regime came to power, the first thing it did was suppress women. It took them out because it knows if we can take a society and obsess it with this idea of you have to wear your hijab like this, or you have to, keep your women at home, or women don't have a role in this, and sort of take away the rights of women, it gives it more power, right, to sort of exert itself in a society. That's how fundamentalism works. It figures out who's the enemy, who's the other, who's the less than, and then it sort of pinpoints that, and everybody gets, frazzled and sort of focused on that and not on really what's going on in the bigger picture. So women from the very beginning have been suppressed more than any other group under the Iranian regime, but also been more active because of that and because of the history they've had in the country and sort of their role in the community. So when the Iranian resistance came together 60 years ago, it recognized that the way to topple any dictatorship in the regime is to give women a leadership role in that. Through that channel, Mariam Rajavi rose to the top of the resistance. She is the leader of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. She is a woman that when I'm in her presence, I have goosebumps on my skin. I mean, she is just incredible in terms of her ability to understand our oppression as women across the world, not just as Iranian women, but as women across the world, our femininity, and understand that is not a negative thing, but a positive thing, and how that plays into leadership, resistance, right? And sort of changing the way that we operate as human beings. She has inspired hundreds of thousands of Iranian women to sort of fully take on this role within the resistance and within the change of our own country. So she has set that example. As a result of that, the majority of the resistance leadership is women. Within the factions within the country itself, the sort of resistance groups that we have within the country itself, women are at the helm of that. Outside of the country, politically speaking, women are leading this effort. In order to sort of fight your enemy, you have to understand what your enemy is, and you have to come at its heart, right? So that's what we're doing by raising the role of women and sort of the role of women in the resistance against the regime. And we believe that's the future of Iran. One of the first things on the docket in terms of hopefully the day that the regime falls is to give back women their rights to choose how they dress, how they function, their role in family, and all of that in Iran. And it's part of the Mariam Rajavi has a 10-point plan that she puts forward. That is one of the key elements of it is women's rights and equality.
I love that. I think we should all take inspiration from her because, Iran, America, any other country, we're all the same. We're all just people.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of similarities and overlap. And at the end of the day, I think when you I mean, I just can't even imagine how many women in Iran and who are part of this resistance who like lost a father or lost a husband or lost a brother, and probably all of them. I think, you know, when you push women to a point where they feel like they have nothing to lose, man, you better get out of the way. You better watch out, because we are a force to be reckoned with when you've already taken the things that we care about. Then we have nothing to lose. And that is just so inspiring to me, because I do feel that women are the way out of all of this. And I say that as a giant blanket statement, but all of it, I think, for all nations, for, I think, society and humanity. You know, no kings, but maybe a queen. I'm just kidding. I don't want a queen either, but you know, I think it's time. So let's talk about the hot button topic is the nuclear weapons, right? Let's you know, because I think there's that just things get really murky really quick around the dinner table, right? And so, does Iran have a nuclear program? Why does Iran have a nuclear program? And was it close? What do we need to know about that?
Yes, yes, and yes. It has a nuclear program. It continues to have a nuclear program. It has been severely undermined by what has recently happened. But it has every intention of continuing to do that. That is its negotiating chip, right? That is so, you know, in the West, we have administrations come. We live in democracies. Administrations come, administrations go. There will be a time again where it will come to the table and it will say, you want me to stop doing nuclear? Give me this, do this, open up that, allow me here, do that, right? So that's its chip. So it's not going to let go of it, and it wants to have that. It wants to be able to exert its power in that way in the region. It already has done that through its proxies in Syria and Lebanon and all over the Middle East, right? So it wants to have even further to push that even further, push that agenda even further, and the nuclear weapon will do that for Iran. The development of a nuclear weapon gives it even a negotiating ground, right? So once it has it, you can imagine what would happen there. And it was very close, and it has no intention of stopping. It's not going to stop. Listen, again, there's tons. We are in an age of technology, globalization, right? Nothing is going to stop this regime from pursuing this other than the Iranian people, right? Because that regime has to go. Once that regime is gone, Iran will no longer be a nuclear-seeking country. That's another part of Maryam Rajavi's 10-point plan, is that we be a nuclear-free country. Until the dynamics of this world change, there is no reason for Iran to have a nuclear weapon, right? I personally wish no one had a nuclear weapon, but that's a different story, right? We want a peaceful country, a democracy, a secular country, right? And we understand that having a nuclear weapon does not put us in that position. So that's something that if you, again, give the Iranian people and support the Iranian people in toppling this regime, is the only way to end them from pursuing this nuclear weapon. There's nothing we can do from an external. I mean, look what happened. Look how hard they hit it, right? It's still going on. And yes, it'll take a little bit of time to come back, but are we just going to do this like every 6 months, every year? We're just going to bomb Iran? That's not a solution. That's not a way out of this. The way out of this is to get rid of the regime, and that's through the Iranian people.
Does the resistance have as many lobbyists as the regime does, or is it, how come certain groups get to have so much more of a voice and others don't? Is it the fear that the resistance has from being super vocal, and that's the edge they have?
No, the resistance is super vocal. We have huge gatherings. Every year, Maryam Rajavi, she lives in France, outside of Paris, and a lot of the political arms of the resistance are in Paris because of that. And so we have like gatherings of 100,000 people once a year there. Across the United States, we have all kinds of groups. There's hundreds of Iranian grassroots community groups across the world that gather, right? We are very vocal. We are not scared of speaking up. I think, honestly, the people of this resistance have been through so much. They're pretty much fearless in terms of like their willingness to talk about this issue and their willingness to put the facts out there in terms of what's happening. But this is a resistance group that doesn't take money from any external powers. It is grassroots funded. It is self-sufficient, and we do that very intentionally so nobody thinks they own us. Nobody thinks that like we belong to this group or we belong to that group, right? So that limits our ability to sort of have that footprint that we want to have to the extent that we would like. However, because of also the lobbying that the regime does, which they are very wealthy. They have been fueled under many administrations in the West, right? From both the United States and Europe. Because of the lobbying they do, they also have positioned us in ways that are just inaccurate in terms of the perspective that people have of what this resistance really wants and stuff. So we're fighting an uphill battle of trying to, you can imagine how much resources this takes to try to keep things active in Iran, support the resistance that exists in Iran, the global movement, all of that, very grassroots. We are very effective at it. We've had hundreds of legislative bodies across the United States and Europe sign off on our 10-point plan, on many of the resolutions that we've put forward. We've had enormous progress, but this is a global war that we're fighting. And so, depending on who's in power, what the incentives are, the business dealings that are happening, etc., whose voice is louder is going to depend on that. And that's not what we're after. We're after freedom and democracy for the Iranian people. We're not after business deals and etc., etc. So just like everything else in our country and in the world, really, unfortunately, those things usually get more play and more of a voice.
Well, it's pay to play right now, and so the more money you have, the louder your voice can be, not necessarily as impactful, but that it's just everything to get in front of a lot of people. It costs money, and so the group that has more money is going to have an advantage there. I think it really took me aback learning that you guys don't take any money. And imagine, I just can't even really fathom organizing and doing all that for 60 years and not being taking money from people, which, would be very helpful, I would imagine. Right. But it's just not possible. And so I think, it's just incredible, really. It's just truly incredible. I can only hope that maybe we're getting closer. Maybe right now with all this attention on Iran, right? And it's such a crazy time. Forgive my brevity, but the world is really watching, and I do think this is a time to educate Westerners that, would, I think, be very much on the side of let Iran liberate themselves, let them do that. Let's advocate for the third option. Let's talk about that more. And all these things can be true at the same time. The regime can be bad and the nuclear program can be real, and we also still don't need to liberate another country. Let them do that themselves, And I think it gets a little murky, right? Because all these things can be true at the same time, and it doesn't necessarily provide a clear answer, except for the people that have been fighting for 60 years, which I just find that so phenomenal and fascinating, to just really risk so much and be living under constant fear and never giving up.
I was raised in this movement, and I can tell you, every time you started to feel sorry for yourself just a little bit, right? You start to get those human feelings of damn, this is hard, or gosh, is it going to be like this forever? Or am I going to lose another person in my life? You would meet someone in the resistance that had just been through so much more than you had, and, had been in prison, or had a brother and sister and a cousin all killed at once, or, all the things that have happened, right? And you realize how fortunate you were and how important what we are doing is. And it just refocused you and redirected you, and that was something we don't have the luxury of. And I don't think the world does at this point, but honestly, as Iranians, it's so bad. And when you look around the people that have been impacted by this and what it has done to their lives and for so many generations now, it doesn't feel like a choice anymore. It feels like this is what must happen. And the only people that are going to make it happen is the people of Iran. So we have to drive that forward. And thankfully the resistance is supported financially, politically, etc., by the Iranian people around the world, from within Iran, etc. But it's, as you said, it's not complicated, and there's no simple answers here. And I think we have, as you said, an opportunity right now. Everyone I've connected to within Iran and said, "Are you okay? How is everything?" Just did those checks, of course, when things started to happen a few weeks ago. there's a level of excitement actually in people. They say this is everybody agrees horrible. Last thing we wanted was to be bombed by an external, force of any kind, let alone the United States. But look, the regime is at its weakest moment, and the world is watching. Let's see what happens now. This could be the moment, right? So I think the hope is real. It's strong, and the resistance is strong, and we will get there. We'll get there.
I love that. I think, to quote Eva Posner, she said, Americans don't know the difference between discomfort and oppression. And I think that Iran is a really good example of oppression, and right now America is a good example of discomfort. And I think we can see where we could go, but we can also be really inspired by the people of Iran and inspired by that resistance and that goodness that just comes from absolute horror and sadness and grief. And then look who it is stepping up. It's women leading the charge. It's women providing that centered, path forward. And I think that we should all take inspiration from that and also pay very close attention. And so, humans are human. I don't see myself any different than an Iranian woman, other than I have suffered tremendously less, than her. But we're all the same, and we're all on this planet together. And I think this is an opportunity because the world is watching, and people are making decisions, and people are willing to fight more than ever. And so I hope that this story resonates with people. I hope it provides a little bit more clarity as to what's going on and what do people really want. Americans, we like to take up causes for other people, and we don't even necessarily know the whole story, but we're well-intended for the most part, but not necessarily always educated the right way. So I really appreciate you taking time to sit with me today. How can people get connected with your organization or the resistance or whatever? What is the best way for people if they're listening to this? I would say, number one, if you have a podcast or something, please invite Zahra to be on it so that we can get this message to more people. Just like you said, every conversation can make a difference. But what are some things that people can do on your end that could help?
I think the easiest way would be to connect to NCRI Women. And that stands for National Council of Resistance of Iran, when the women's sort of page that we have, and that will connect you into everything else around the resistance and the movement. So it's NCRI Women, and that handle, you can find it anywhere. If you just search it, it'll pop up on all different platforms. So depending on where you are, you can connect with us there. And again, connect with the Iranian people, and not the sort of narrative that's being pushed on the American people right now. Connect with the actual Iranian people to hear what they want, what their dreams are, what their aspirations are. And I promise you, if you do that, you will be doing them a huge service and will be part of the resistance with them.
Well, count me in. I got nothing to lose. Let's go. I'm ready.
Thank you, Molly. It's been a great conversation.
Well, thank you. And, I'd love to have you back anytime. And, I'm going to have one of your counterparts, Zolal, come on the show to get even deeper into these things. And, I'm more than honored and grateful to use my platform to help get this message out because, there's a lot of things that I don't know about. I am not an educated woman, but the one thing I will never celebrate is bombs being dropped anywhere. Yeah. And so having this opportunity to learn more and speak more intelligently about it and compassionately about it is such a great gift to me. So thank you for that. And let's do this again. And maybe we'll have some updates. Maybe we can do this on a regular basis, and you can update us on the resistance and what's happening.
Well, we have this saying in our movement that we say "Farda Tehran," which means tomorrow we're in Tehran. So, Molly, if we push it the way we want to push it, we're going to invite you to Tehran, and we can have an in-person conversation there with many other beautiful people and women, and hopefully that will be what we'll be celebrating together.
I'll be there.
I would love to come back anytime and talk to you. It would be a pleasure.
Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure spending time with you, and I really appreciate it. So those of you who are listening, thank you for taking time to listen to this conversation. I hope it gave you a little bit of insight as to what's going on, and maybe when you're talking to those family members that have things wrong, now you have some talking points to give back to them, because I don't see how anybody could not resonate with autonomy and democracy and peace and not having nuclear weapons, especially a country that has proven to be so unkind and cruel to its own people. There's no limits to that kind of cruelty and evil, and so it kind of is all of our responsibility to support the resistance from where I'm sitting. So I don't know if that puts me on a list, but I'll be on it. I don't care. So
we got your back, Molly. Don't worry.
There you go. I mean, gosh, I mean, what you have all sacrificed your entire lives is nothing that could, is a drop in the bucket. So I am honored, and thank you again, and thank you for tuning in. All of your links will be in the show notes, so people can connect with you directly. They can go to the website that you mentioned, and hopefully, again, if you found this content valuable, please share it. That's the best thing you could do. If you're on Substack, restack it. If you saw it on Facebook or LinkedIn, share it. Even if you don't want to share it publicly and you want to share it with people or share it with your siblings so your next awkward family dinner is a little bit more educated, whatever it takes, but let's get this message out, because I think it really matters, and I don't think it's what most of us are hearing. So onward and upward. Let's take care of each other. And thank you again, Zahra, for your time.
Thanks for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.